So, hi everybody, thanks so much for joining us. As I mentioned, I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager at the Seattle Public Library. And as we begin tonight, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. These are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders past and present and thank them for their stewardship of this land. We're excited for tonight's event with Jasmine Silvera, Olivia Waite, and Robin Bradford. And we're grateful to tonight's event sponsors. We've got a wonderful partnership with our friends at Third Place Books, and we're very grateful to the Seattle Public Library Foundation, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, Seattle City of Literature, and the Seattle Times for their generous support of tonight's program. And now I'm delighted to introduce this evening's guests. Jasmine Silvera spent her impressionable years sneaking kissing books, I like that, between comics and fantasy movies, and she's been mixing them up in her writing ever since. Jasmine is the author of the Grace Bloods series and the Tooth and Spell trilogy. An amateur dancer, photographer, and occasional cellist, she lives here in the Pacific Northwest with her partner in crime and their small, opinionated human charge. Olivia Waite writes queer historical romance, fantasy, science fiction, and essays. And we're very excited that she is the romance fiction columnist for the New York Times Book Review. They'll be speaking tonight with Robin Bradford. Robin is a librarian here in the Pacific Northwest. She was recognized as RWA's 2016 Kathy Lynn's Librarian of the Year. And to build reader-focused popular collections in public libraries, she's worked with authors to help get their titles into these collections. She's worked with librarians to push for equal treatment of genre fiction and work with readers so that they can find their favorite authors on the library shelves. Tonight, they'll be talking about Jasmine and Olivia's newest books, Binding Shadows, the first book in Jasmine's Tooth and Spell trilogy, and The Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows, the second book in Olivia's Feminine Pursuit series. Welcome, Jasmine, Olivia, and Robin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So the first question, would each of you please describe your books? Who wants to start?
Okay. Well, so the new one, The Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows, is a lovely summary sapphic historical set in 1820. It's about a printmaker and engraver named Agatha Griffin who has been widowed, and she finds a colony of bees in her print warehouse, and it's kind of a problem because bees. So she goes looking for a local beekeeper to help her with this. She meets Penelope Flood, who is loves poetry and loves to wander around the village helping all the village folk with their hives, because a lot of people have hives as a secondary side gig type money-making venture because it's an agrarian community. And of course, they become friends slowly and they fall in love while all of this tumultuous year is happening. 1820 was wildly eventful in English life. There was a divorce trial in Parliament for the King and Queen. There was civil unrest. People honestly feared that Britain was going to be overthrown in a French Revolution style uprising. And then it ends happily because of course.
Because of course. So beekeeping was kind of the gig economy of 1820.
It was definitely one of them. It was fairly cheap to set up because you could set up a straw beehive for nothing. Your kids could take care of it because it was very low maintenance. And then you would get honey and wax that you could either eat or sell or both. So it was just the way that people grow tomatoes now, people kept bees.
We are going to come back to the bees because I'm fascinated by that. Miss Jasmine.
It's Robin.
Will you please describe your book?
Yeah, so Binding Shadows, I wish I had a copy. I feel like Olivia is setting the gold standard for book presentation here. Binding Shadows is a paranormal romance. It's set in an alternative version of Prague in the Czech Republic, and it stars a very reluctant werewolf who is much happier reading a book, teaching a seminar, and chewing up his undergraduates than actually turning into a wolf at night and running through the woods. And he winds up having to work with a brilliant librarian assistant graduate student who happens to be a little bit witchy. and the two of them get entangled in a mystery of a haunted book, and a witch who's about 400 years old and very, very pissed off. And so they wind up having to work together to escape the witch's curse and save the city of Prague. This is a spin-off series from my first set of books, which is set in the same world. This takes place about 10 years earlier. It features some characters that are in the second series. It's definitely a little bit more personal stakes than the big world building of the previous books, and definitely for fans of paranormal romance, werewolf shifters, happily ever after guaranteed, I promise.
And a little shape-shifting and, well, maybe some reluctant shape-shifting, but it's still in there.
It is in there. I think it always seemed such a great idea if you could be a shapeshifter. Like, how much fun would that be? And so the challenge was writing a character who really doesn't enjoy that experience and grows to love it through the course of the book. Not just because of this relationship, but also because of his relationship to his family, who plays a very large part in the book. I like to write quirky families, and this one is probably one of my favorite that I've ever written, especially Mom, the matriarch of the family, who is quite a boss witch, if I do say so myself, and she's a lot of fun to write and to work with.
Well, that's funny, because that was kind of the next question that I was going to ask you, or both of you. Which characters in your books, in these particular books, were the most fun to write, and which were the most challenging?
Oh yeah, definitely Beryl. So Beryl is the matriarch of the Vogel family. She is a Black American woman who's brought her entire family back to Prague to sort of basically save them from collapsing US, which was not what I was intending when I started writing it, but stranger than fiction. And in any case, she is very confident in her powers and her ability. And on a lot of this, she's kind of working behind the scenes to help her family accomplish their goals, whether they know them or not, and see them both physically safe and emotionally happy. And she's got 3 werewolf sons and a daughter who dances for God. So she's got her hands full. And she's a lot of fun to write, and she's all attitude, and she really doesn't take anything from those boys, and it's a blast. Challenging is probably the eldest brother, Mark, who shows up in this book quite a bit. He is got a lot of baggage from their relocation, and his wolf is actually his best buddy, and he actually does not a fan of people for the most part, except for an overprotectiveness of his family. So he's just really hard to write, but I really love him at the same time, and I want the best for him. So we'll see him show up in book 2.
I know that feeling. Olivia.
Well, I think the easiest character in this book for me was Agatha. She's the printer, and she's gotten used to relating to people through work. She and her husband ran the print shop, and so her husband and her son were working with her. And so all of her social relationships have kind of revolved around her job. And with Penelope and with the people of Melitton, which is the small town, she's got to learn to branch out and kind of have friendships that are just there for the sake of being friends. And it takes her a long time to kind of figure out how to do that. And she's very nervous at the start. And a lot of that was just so much fun to write. And you got to contrast it with how close she is to her son and how well she knows him, even though she feels like he's growing away from her. And then she's growing closer to the Melitton folks, and she doesn't really know what to do about it or how to feel, or even if she's allowed to feel things about it for a long time. And that was just, I don't know, it was kind of a pleasure to dig into. It felt chewy in a good way. And I don't know if there was a hardest character. Penelope was a little bit hard because I think my instinct was to go full earth goddess kind of a thing. And she kept having these obstacles crop up. And I realized she's been hiding a lot of herself. And once I realized that she was doing that, then it kind of opened up. But it was definitely I had to kind of dig into her a bit. And
that's so interesting. The hiding, because that kind of matches with Jasmine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, those are really interesting characters to explore. Is why one hides and on all of the reasons behind and how they come out of the shell is such an interesting journey and an arc for me to follow that it's really, I feel like I really love that arc particularly.
I think sometimes for me, it's also a bit cheating. My greatest trick, when something about a character isn't working for me and I can't figure out why, like when there's a problem with the plot or the character's not doing what I really want them to do, I find a way to make that the character's problem instead of mine. So like, you know, if I have a character who just won't do this thing, I just start having other people yell at him about not doing this thing. And suddenly like something else interesting happens. Or like, you know, you have a character and for some reason, you, no matter how many times you write it, they just keep going left instead of right. You realize, oh, well, you make that the book problem, not my problem. And it suddenly everything gets easy again. But it does feel like some sort of shortcut.
So you're kind of writing around their obstinance. Like,
yeah.
And you're enlisting the rest of the characters in the book to actually help you get them out of the, push them out of obstinance. Yeah.
Yeah, but it generates something as opposed to like just shutting something down. So I think that's, yeah.
And so do you ever then change the thing that they won't do because they won't do it, or do you just work around until you make it a thing that they end up doing?
Well, these days I cut a lot of that out because I write full synopses before I start writing the books. And so a lot of this character is not turning out the way I thought is actually fixed in the synopsis portion, when you can like, you know, instead of rewriting 20,000 words of something, you change 2 sentences and you're good to go. So
okay.
Yeah, also a good writer hack, I think.
I love it. So getting back to the bees, please. How much research did you have to do to get that in there?
Oh my God. Well, I've been reading about bees for way too long. My great-grandfather kept bees when I was growing up. And then I stumbled onto a kid's book called Linnets and Valerians that was very bee focused and was all about that like kind of magical Cornish bee, like kind of like, you know, you tell the bees when somebody's died and all of those various folk superstitions around bees. And I got obsessed as a kid. And so bees always felt kind of magic to me. And then when I started looking into it more for this book, I realized, and I kind of tracked it from when I was young to when I started researching. I would just always kind of keep an eye out for interesting bee stuff because they always felt like poetry. And the thing you start noticing when you look into the history of bees and beekeeping is that whenever people talk about bees, they're almost always talking about people instead of bees. Like Virgil has a very long poem about bees where he's very explicit. He's like, let me tell you why bees are like people. It's like this. And you're like, okay. But people like to use bees as kind of ideal people. And then they would either try to make people be like bees, or they would try to make bees be like people in really interesting ways. Like, you know, we talk about queen bees in social situations even now, and we have this whole metaphor and the idea of everybody having a place in society and everybody obeys the queen, or is it that everybody has a job and is provided for and the good of the hive is greater than any one individual? And so you have like both like left and right sides of the political aisle use bees to prove their points, which is just super fun to track.
The whole queen bee thing kept going through my head when I was reading it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was having a lot of fun with that. I'm like, how many times can I like work this theme in? But yeah, it was so much fun. Like bees are just so fun to talk about, and everything about them is like strange and interesting. Like the way you have to treat them. There's a scene in the book where Penelope has to rehome the colony. And it's not a wild swarm that you catch in a different way. This is a set of bees that's already started building honeycomb, so you have to treat them a little differently. And I watched all these videos of like people pulling bees out of the inside of house walls, and like I read up on how they would do it in like, you know, in the days before bee vacuums, for instance. But it was just
wait, pause. Bee vacuums. I'm sorry. I'm just
we were both gonna yes.
Hold the phone.
Bee vacuum?
Bee vacuum. One of the best things about bees is how weird everything has been at every point in beekeeping. Because nowadays, if you find your house walls have been like honeycombed up by bees, which happens. They call out one of the beekeepers, and he comes in with his bee vacuum, and it literally just vacuums up the bees, and it's got a little chamber so that you can get all of the live insects out, and then you can remove the honeycomb more easily. Because bees aren't terribly aggressive, you know, except when you're trying to, say, uproot them from their home that they've built with their own, you know, 6 legs / mouths. But
Some homemade honey.
yeah.
Wow.
Ta-da!
So when did you do any hands-on when you were?
I did not. I meant to, but it was winter, and like, you know, I had a lot of experience from when I was a kid, so I was drawing a lot on that. And there's definitely plenty of colonies of bees in the area around us right now, and I wanted to go to like a professional hive. Part of the difficulty is that the professional hives aren't using the same kind of hives that my heroines would be using, because those hives had not been invented yet. And so part of it was me trying not to learn too much about stuff that I definitely couldn't use ever. So I was like, okay, we have to be a little bit cagey. And so I went into a deep dive on like archaic hive designs, which is fantastic. Like, people did all kinds of things to try and make beekeeping easier until 1850, when the Langstroth hive was invented, which is the one that we pretty much use now, because it works so well for the bees that they've never really needed to change it. I could seriously fill an hour talking about bees, so if you want to switch, this is probably a good time.
No, I'm fine. Let's carry this on.
No, ma'am. Miss Jasmine.
I want to hear about the bees.
I know, but later. I want to hear about academia and werewolves.
Yes.
And how you got it so incredibly right while being in just a completely different world. Like, how does that happen?
Well, I have this element in my back pocket. It's called handwavium. So whenever I don't know what to do, I talk to my friends. I'm very, very fortunate. I have a lot of very well-educated friends who, many of them I saw going through their process of higher education at some level or another. And so I picked up, you know, a little bit of a magpie for stories and experiences. And they just all kind of tucked in the back of my head. I lived in Prague for a couple of years, and I visited the university. Charles University is one of the oldest universities in Europe, and it's beautiful. And the libraries are beautiful, and it's very well known for having really gorgeous buildings. And so there's like the physical knowing of that academic setting, and then my own experience with friends who were kind enough to listen to the story and say, well, that won't work, but if you maybe try this, like, here's where she's going to run into trouble with her advisor and trying to get her fellowship. And then when all else fails, I go, this is a made up world. And so things work a little differently here with my old friend Handwavium. So thank you. That means a lot that it feels authentic. I feel like the details and those kind of moments are the things that bring the fantasy home and make the fantasy feel a little less fantastic and out there and a little more possible. So it's really a relief to hear that sold very well. I think academia is something I'm intrigued with because I quit early. I got my bachelor's and I ran like hell. So I'm always fascinated by people who are really deeply involved and invested in higher education. And it's been really, and I love libraries and I love librarians. So the idea of putting all of that together in a book was really, really intriguing and fun.
So much of it felt just, I did not run. I should have ran, but I was in as a student for a long time. So a lot of that felt exactly how I remembered, even though it was Prague and not, Illinois or Indiana. It still felt very much like what I was accustomed to. Also, the bookshop, that felt like it was a real store. And you could just walk in off the street and you don't really know what's happening behind the scenes, but you could search through the shelves and maybe find a book of magic, and then you're in deep trouble.
So Prague is full of these antique bookstores and bookshops. Prague and the Czech Republic is it's a very literate populace who loves books and literature and reading. And it's really incredible to go into some of these stores that are like in a basement under a supermarket or next door to the supermarket at the tram stop. So like the tram spits you out onto this busy street, and then there's this like teeny little bookstore tucked in, and you go inside and it's a warren. Like it just feels like it's cornered a dimensional pocket or something, and you've got books. You're like, the store can't possibly be this big on the outside. Where did all the space come from? And all of the books and little bits of ephemera. So it was very easy for me to just populate my own mental bookstore in Prague with all of the little bits and details and bobs that I've seen being there.
That definitely felt like just a little bit more magic than the magic that was in the book. That was very, very welcome. So my next question then is, why Prague and why Europe? Although it does lend itself to the more like the older, more magical kind of setting.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why. I think it's kind of unmined territory in fantasy and even romance. We see a lot of stuff set in London and Paris and parts of Spain. I actually lived in Prague for about 2 years, and so I had a chance to just really get to know it. And I was not working and spending a lot of time being a tourist. We were there for my husband's job. We got right after we got married. So the joke is that it was the working honeymoon, and he did the working and I did the honeymooning. And so I went on every tour I could, and I just really fell in love with the city. And I think there's something interesting to me about placing this family and in the city, and this idea that brown people brown people have been in Europe for a long time, and B, are still there, and that this is an experience one can have in the city that was personal to me, because I was a brown girl roaming this very old European city, and it felt like a way to really personalize it by this particular family. But Prague is magical. I mean, you just feel like around the corner you're gonna like stumble into some kind of like magical something. And it's got a history of alchemy, and a lot of esoteric arts really became popular there during the reign of Rudolph in the Holy Roman Empire. And so it's got like the mythology of Prague is bonkers. I mean, it's banana pants. It is a country where the word defenestration, which is basically to throw somebody out the window, that word came from Prague because it happened so many times in Prague. That's the solution to every problem, is just to throw somebody out the window.
A great historical fact from high school, all of us, we loved the defenestration of Prague. Like, that was our absolute favorite moment.
And it didn't just happen once. Like, it was like a repeated theme historically. We just throw people out. You know what? You cause trouble, out the window you go. Yeah, never go to the conference room and sit next to the window. That's what I learned living in Prague. But yeah, it's a magical city, and it's so very serene feeling in spite of it being a very popular tourist destination. But it's very alive with its history, and it wasn't as damaged during World War II as some of the other European cities. So it feels very old and very original old. And I just fell in love with it. Like, it was really a fascinating place to set a story in and to set a world in. And it gives me an excuse to go back. So when we can travel again, that's probably one of the first places on my list, is a revisit to Prague.
It definitely felt like this is the place where I would expect to see witches and werewolves just hanging out, but on the down low.
Well, the mythology of the city is that it was founded by witches, basically, that there are 3 sister witches who the oldest one saw the city from the hilltop. Now, the story is totally stolen from another bit of mythology, but the founding, the idea that these 3 women basically were the daughters of the king, and they took over and ruled the city or ruled the country. And at one point, the villagers were like, well, this woman can't run this by herself. She's got to get married. And so she foresaw her husband. She said, "Oh, go into the field and look for this man. He will be pulling and oxen, and I think there's something about the oxen's legs. Or there's a whole bit of the story. Well, one wonders, did she foretell this, or did she know this guy? You know, so whether she was an actual prophetess or just really smart woman, you know, the city is founded in magic. So it's a rich setting to work in.
And that actually leads perfectly into the next question. Thank you so much. How do you balance the plot outside romance with the plot of the romance?
Cool.
I've
Well,
stumped the group.
No,
I
I
mean,
think I'm just pausing because the answer I want to say is that sometimes I don't. Sometimes I lean a little too much toward, and part of the issue with Waspish Widows is some of the reviews have come back saying, but there's just so many more plot lines. I want the romance. And partly it's because of the bees, I was really trying to tell like a communal story. And so you had to show them fitting into their community, but in order to do that, you had to have all these people that were there for more than mere window dressing. So I didn't want to just have like 8 people around them who never changed. And
Right.
so their stories became important. And I was trying to kind of, and I've never done anything like this before. So I was trying to weave them all in, both on the town scale and with the wider history of George and Caroline and the Bill of Pains and Penalties. And so it was, and like the huge social protests that were happening around that. And I really liked the balance I ended up with, but it also meant that the romance took forever to get going. And so so I spent all this time laying the groundwork, and it was super fun, and I really liked it. And then when they got going, I'm like, no, by now they're just going to dive in. They know what they want. And so it's a very unusual, it's a slow burn. And that's really unusual for me. I'm usually an impatient person. And the very first thing I did after writing this book was I wrote out a synopsis where the heroines are hate making out by chapter 3. So book 3 is not going to be the same thing. So my poor editor was like, Olivia, can they at least kiss by 70%? And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
It's slow burn. It's slow burn. That's what.
it is the slowest of burns. But in the meantime, there's gardens everywhere. So it's not like you're missing pleasure. It's just not the sexy times yet. So.
yeah, I love a slow burn. I that is the way I like to read. So it's those are the ones that pull me along. So I feel like, yeah, it did take a little while to get going. And the external is really important to me. I just can't help it. Sorry, you're going to have a little world building with your romance. I grew up mixing genres, and I grew up reading, when I started writing fantasy, and I really thought I wanted to write a second world fantasy novel. And I was trying for a long time, and the kissing bits kept getting in the way. And there just was a lot more of them than there were supposed to be, and there was a lot more weight to them. And at a certain point, I just sort of said, you know what, this is what I want, is the romance. And so now I have to work the other way, because I sometimes have to excavate some of the world building to sort of to shine the romance up a little.
Mm-hmm.
But the characters last longer for me, and that happily ever after feels more satisfying for me when they've had a long ramp up to get there. And then, like Olivia said, it's, then once it's on, it is on like Donkey Kong. Like there is no, there is no like, will we not later. It all is all like, yes.
No, that's all at the front. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and it kind of feels like more of a 50-50 mix, which isn't bad. It's not bad. It's just how people kind of come to it. So one of my favorite sayings is the author writes the book and puts it out there, and then how the reader interacts with it is on the reader. So it's not good or bad. It just is, unless you perceive it as good or bad. Yeah. So if you like it, I love it, is another favorite saying. So yes, I enjoyed actually the secondary characters in both of your books and their stories. So I would have been sad if more of that was cut out. because it really did feel like it added needed weight that, you know, if it wasn't there, we would have been missing. Especially, Olivia, in your book, the romance between the Sun and his
Yeah.
paramour that were there. That really, it was interesting in that it was another almost full romance that happened on the pages of the book, and it was very non-traditional the way that it turned
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
And
I've been dinged for that in a few places.
really,
People are saying, you know, this is way too modern. They wouldn't have, and I'm like, let me point you to all the academic articles that use the terms Regency-free love. Like there were utopian communes in the Regency where they're like, why do we have marriage at all? Why isn't everybody just sleeping with everybody all the time? Like, ethically, we can see no reason not to. They were tiny. I mean, they were like 5 people, and they never really lasted because they hadn't worked out. Like, it's
well,
complicated.
explain a little bit about what was non-traditional about this story.
This particular,
Yeah, those two
so
characters.
yes, Sydney and Eliza. They're Agatha's son Sydney and her apprentice Eliza, and they've been thrown much together in the course of working. Eliza appears in book 1. She's initially a maid for Lucy and Catherine, and she gets apprenticed because she has like some drawing skill, and she's really good at it, and she really likes running the print shop. And she and Sydney have a bit of a thing, and Agatha's sitting there like shipping it pretty hard, like just like, oh good, they're gonna get married. I will pass on the print shop to them. This is all wonderful. Sydney just needs to grow up and stop hanging out with all his political friends. And so she has this plan for them that definitely involves marriage. And spoiler, Eliza and Sydney don't think marriage is right for them. They've been, because there's all the arguments starting in like the 1790s with Mary Wollstonecraft, but going forward, Richard Carlisle had a lot to say about this. The idea that marriage was actually a terrible bet for women, that it was like legally and like morally oppressive to women, was very, you know, I wouldn't call it popular, but it was definitely well known. It was a very established strain of thought at the time. It was talked about a lot, especially in the kind of political circles Sydney was traveling in. So he and Eliza decide they're not going to get married because they want her to still be a legal person. They have decided they're not going to participate in a system that's just going to like make them unequal. And it's definitely one option, and Agatha finds out about this and freaks out, because of course she does. And so on the one side, you have the queer women who wish they could get married, and then you have Sydney and Eliza, who very much don't want to get married because marriage as it's legally established is such a mess. And we're watching a royal marriage go absolutely down the tubes in print and in the courts right now. And so
And in the
all of these
streets.
things. And what?
And in the streets.
In the streets, yes. Yeah, we're seeing, oh, I forget my own characters' names, our ballad seller and her husband, who don't work so well together. Like, he's a shiftless, one-time actor who now can barely keep a job, and it's, yeah. But they're stuck with each other, and they don't know how to get out. And it's, yeah, so that's all of these things happening at once. So yeah, I was writing a very complicated marriage book in the lead up to my 10-year anniversary with Mr. Waite, so Lord bless him.
But that also puts me in mind of Jasmine's very pissed off witch, 400-year-old witch, and kind of the situation she finds herself in, you know, when she is unearthed by Barbara.
Yeah, so in this world, well, I mean, witches have been slighted a few times in this world, but for the most part, history sort of follows history as we know it up until, I would say, I don't know, let's say the 70s or 80s of 1970, 80, right? And this is when we've got this God's world, which I cannot pronounce. So looking back, one of the things that, you know, the witch trials in Europe have been fascinating to me for a long time, and for so many reasons, and one of which is because of, in our reality, witch trials being used as a way to silence and smother women and prevent women from participating in healing and in natural medicine. And it also was, I've read some really interesting papers about it being witchcraft persecution being something of a political play, like a single issue to sway the masses in a way that we might see sometimes happen in modern politics. And that the use of, especially when you have an illiterate mass population that can't read and disseminate and understand information that way, it is to the spectacle of something. And so using the spectacle of coming after a woman who might stand out in the village or have some sort of healing abilities or run afoul of the church is a way for the church to demonstrate to the masses its efficacy, that its religion is sound. And so there was this period in which the Catholics and Protestants you've got this struggle for the hearts and minds of the masses. And I think a lot of women fell into the trap and the jaws of that trap. Now, in this world, there is actual magic. And so, and I would say this world is actual magic. But in my world, this witch was persecuted for using her powers and caught up in this cycle of persecution and is pissed. And she's mad. And as her final act, not to spoil too much, was to make sure that she didn't go down without a pretty good fight and a way to come back and deal with people later. And there's an interesting balance, I think, particularly in that time of history in Prague, because you've got, on one hand, you've got Rudolph II, who's the emperor at the time. He is like the big man in town in the Prague castle doing all the great things. He's a patron of the arts and the sciences and the proto-sciences of that time. Alchemy is big. Let's turn everything into gold. And he's bringing in all of these astrologers and astronomers and, everybody who claims to have some sort of esoteric knowledge, but, he's the big man in charge. So that's okay. And the countryside, the women who are natural healers and naturopaths and midwives are getting dragged out of their homes and persecuted. And so there's this double standard that I think as I did my research into the period from which she would have come from, felt really obvious to play into this book. And it echoes and mirrors the struggle that Barbara has in academia in the present day of the book, because she has run afoul of the powers that be in her academic environment and is basically being sort of railroaded out of a position that she would need to get her degree. And so it's this, in a way they are similar, and they mirror each other in some ways. Now, both are very different women, and there's a reason that one is the hero and the other is the villain, without spoilers. And just to say that, so it's really interesting because I think in some ways there's an effort to right a wrong, but it also goes too far and it hurts people along the way. And she's willing to sacrifice somebody else's future to fix her past, the villain. And so that becomes the part where it goes a little too far. And for me, villains are always attractive to me when their struggle feels real and when I can identify with them on some level. And I definitely feel like I felt for her. I mean, I felt it was easy to write her somewhat sympathetic in her hurt and her injury and the wrong that had been committed. But then also like, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to get out of the way because my couple's got to get together.
Right.
And, and it becomes a way for Barbara to then find her strength and her power. And so I feel like in that way, she reclaims a lot of her own heritage and her own power, and maybe rights the wrong in a different way and in a better way that allows that legacy to carry forward. So yeah. I went wildly astray.
No, you were perfect. You were perfect. And it exactly what I was trying to think of. Like, they are mirror images, and you just think, yeah, I understand what happened, but this is where you went way off the rails. And so now, you can't, be the hero. You can't be the heroine.
Yeah, and I love that saying, everyone is the hero of their own story, and that includes the villain, and the villain thinks they're doing the right thing for their reasons, which, you know, and now for those of us who are enjoying the novel can see like, well, this might be a right reason, but you're doing it in a terrible way and you're
In a
going to hurt a lot of
terrible
people.
way.
Please stop. So, you know, but that's fun. I think I remember seeing that represented really well on screen in the Black Panther movie. Just
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Killmonger is such a sympathetic villain in so many ways, and it makes the conflict have such even more deeper roots and more of an impact when it comes to a head, because you don't, you know, in some ways you'd want him to see justice, and you want her.
Definitely understand why he is the way he is and why he does what he does.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie's really good about it, because at the same time he's making these really persuasive arguments, but he literally hurts or kills every single woman he comes into contact with, like in the course of the movie. Like, I watched it once and I tracked it. Every time he's on screen with a female character, he either kills her or hits her or, you know, poisons her.
Yeah. And I think that's
like
those
that.
little moments where you telegraph, like, it's don't believe what somebody says, believe what
Yeah.
they do, you know,
Exactly.
and so that was really fun to play with also, because you've got this idea that she's just doing the wrong thing in so many ways. And just, it doesn't matter how great the argument is at a certain point. So yeah, that's a really fun character to write for me. It's really chewy to have a villain that's not just a mustache twirler, but like actually you sympathize with.
I love reading those, but I love writing the mustache twirlers, like the guys who are like sitting there lecturing you about morality while like snipping the wings of their queen bee so she can't fly away. And I'm like, we all hate this guy. We love to hate this guy.
There's room for both, but yeah,
There's
definitely the mustache twirler, you want to see bad things happen to them.
Yeah, and he does, and I don't think anything does. He gets mildly embarrassed because this is a fight we get to have all the time. This is the fight we get to live. But yeah, I'm really excited to see more of Barbara. I'm about halfway through the book, and I'm just like,
she's a great
I just
character.
love her.
I'm
really
excited
love her.
for you.
Yeah, yay! I know, me too.
I'm excited for you.
I love her so much. Like, I mean, I loved her from chapter 1, but having her like triangulate with somebody who's not the hero, because so many times in romance, the hero and the heroine become this like, you know, it's like when you set two mirrors up opposite each other and then all you can see is what is in between the mirrors. And that can be really effective, but I also really like when they're kind of offset. And so the hero and the heroine will have, or the two leads, she said, because she writes queer romance. But the two leads will have, or more leads will have people to reflect back to who are not the other part of the relationship. And so then you can kind of, you can see why the relationship is good, because you can see all these other relationships that it either mirrors or like contrasts with. And so you build this kind of structure in your head. That sounds very academic, but you do it with feelings, so it doesn't feel like cold or distant.
Well, I mean, this just explains why you need a larger cast, supporting cast,
Exactly.
and, you know, all those subplots that some people don't want to see, but are very effective for that very reason.
And those
So
books are there. There's so many books out there. So those of us who need really, really like get there fast, there's a wealth of them. There's something for everyone in the world of books. So I write big books. I cannot lie. They have lots of characters and side people, and that is, I have stopped apologizing for that. That is just the way it is. Please enjoy.
It is 7:45, so if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box and I will ask them. In the meantime, what is the best thing about being a part of the writing community?
That there is a community, that there are, especially up here, I think the greatest thing about the Pacific Northwest and Seattle particularly is the abundance of writers and very successful, very interesting writers to get to know and run into. So
it's the mix of genres in the Pacific Northwest as well is really, I think, productive. You have a big romance contingent, but you also have a big sci-fi fantasy. You have the poets, God help us, and you have like all the literary people as well. It's really rich and layered, and I think all those communities existing kind of with various overlaps is part of what makes Seattle such a good literary city overall.
Let's see. I'm kind of doing a speed round. How do libraries fit into your life as an adult?
Oh God, I never don't have an ebook out from the library. Just I never am free of ebooks from the library. I love it.
Yeah, so I have a 5-year-old now, so we did a lot of library visits, story times, books, piles of books. And then personally, I think when we started doing the distancing and things closed down, I found myself a little stressed and unable to read physical books. Like I couldn't focus on a page of words, which was terrifying. And I discovered that I could listen to audiobooks. And so the library having a robust collection of audiobooks, especially romance and fantasy and all the things that I love that are stress relievers that help me get an escape has just been like life-saving in this particular time. So psyche saving. So yeah, I'm a big, thank you audiobook librarians. I have a few requests.
Yes, that's what we want. I would be remiss if I did not ask this question. What are some of your favorite books in the same genre or subgenre as yours?
Oh God, where to start?
So when they're done with your book and they want something in the same vein.
Alyssa Cole's That Could Be Enough. Courtney Milan's Mrs. Martin's Incomparable Adventure. Anything KJ Charles, anything Cat Sebastian. I'm sure there's people I'm leaving out. Effie Calvin, if you want like very sweet romantic queer fantasy, like with dragons and gods wandering around disguised as mortals, yeah, Effie Calvin. Daughter of the Sun, amazing. I've heard great things about Jordan L. Hawk. They've been on my list for years, and I need to be better at getting to the books on my list, but I wanted to make sure to mention them because everything I hear about these is so good. And I'm just kind of saving them. I'm like, I'm gonna need this whole trove of books someday, because I think I have the whole series at this point. But there's so much good romance, and specifically historical romance, and specifically historical queer romance coming out these days. And it's been really exciting. There's been a big surge of FF coming out across all genres, not just historical romance, but YA and fantasy and sci-fi. And it's been really exciting. Like, yeah. I mean, I'm bi, so I like the dudes as well. But man, seeing this many queer ladies come out in fiction at once has been super, super exciting.
It's like the floodgates opened, actually.
Yes. Yes. I mean, we can still get more. Let's have more, but pretty excited.
Jasmine.
So a couple of recommendations that are like and or tangentially related. If you like the romance and the paranormal romance, definitely Elizabeth Hunter's Elemental series. There's like 8 or 9 books now, so you will have lots to binge. I've heard folks also make comparisons to Alona Andrews. So that also might be if you like the romance and the magic. If you like the gods and mythology and interesting stuff, definitely check out The Shadow Blade by Ceresia Glass. I love that one. I personally would like to hand that to a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't really see a lot of urban fantasy that's not like European Greek gods and goddesses and stuff. I mean, this is Egypt and it's awesome. So definitely. If you're liking like ensemble cast, big cast of characters that I'd like to do, I just read Library of the Unwritten by Jake Hackwith, and it's incredible. It's also a love story to books and writing and libraries, so which I feel like I also try to do. So that one is a great one. I'm a big fan in YA of the Six of Crows and the duology, the Crooked Kingdoms duology, the Leigh Bardugo books. I think that also is another fun cast of characters, a very like inclusive, effortlessly inclusive and fun to read in an alternate Europe setting. And then I had one more, which is now escaping me. Oh, werewolves, because I cannot leave you without another werewolf recommendation. If you have not read Talia Hibbert's Mating the Huntress,
Oh yeah.
it is a blast. It is a
Fantastic.
werewolf and a werewolf hunter
She's wonderful.
lead, and it is so much fun. It is super hot, and it's actually pretty short. So for those of you who like shorter things too, this is a nice quick read. I wish she wrote more paranormal, although I love all of her contemporary romances as well. So I would definitely sign off on anything by Talia Hibbert. But Mating the Huntress, if you got a thing for werewolves, that's definitely where to go next.
So some audience questions have come in. Yay! What takeaway do you hope readers get about romantic love from your books?
Gosh, well, I say this as somebody who did learn a lot of lessons the hard way through mistakes that people made in romance novels. So by the time I was like old enough to date, I'm like, aha, I know this trick. This person says this, but they're going to do this other thing. And it saved me a lot of trouble. So for me, I really do think it's about learning to figure out what you want and just kind of being open to whether or not that's what you think you should want. And being able to communicate that is probably the thing that my characters struggle with in this slow burn. Talk to each other. Yeah, it's not really a didactic kind of genre.
Yeah,
Very true.
I think oh my gosh, I've got one more recommendation. Sorry, El Penelope. If you like big world building, big world building, thick, like the world building has world building. El Penelope's Song Chronicles, and the name of the series
what is it? Song of Blood and Stone?
Yes, is the first one.
Yeah.
Soul Singer is the name of the, anyway. Song of Blood and Stone is the first one. Just go for that. You'll get the rest of them. There's like 4 of them. I think the 4th one is coming out very soon. And great romance storylines also.
And gorgeous covers.
So to answer the question, sorry, I'm just skipping away. I really hope people, I don't know, I hope you love it. I just hope you take away the love. It's wonderful. I hope that I hope that a reader would see that everyone is deserving of love, and there's a certain amount of owning one's own power and faults and foibles and whatever that makes you more lovable, not less. And that we each have something that we feel like makes us unwanted, unworthy. And there's a matter of claiming that and not being afraid of it and running from it, that I think brings these two people together. And you know, it's happens to be wolfing and werewitching, but I think werewitching, is that a thing? But I think that, you know, we all have, there are real things that we all have that we struggle with, that other people don't see, is another aspect of this that I hope that still makes you a lovable, wonderful person that is worthy of love and being loved.
Both very good lessons. Next question. What would you both like to see from paranormal romance and historical romance in the future?
I want more settings. I want so many more settings and time periods. I want to see books in the 1970s. I've found a few. They're fun as heck. I want to see really just wildly different geographies in play. I've been enjoying Therese Bahari's books, which are set in South Africa, and they're so charming. And they have one where they do all the tourist spots in Johannesburg, and I just loved it. And I want to see historical romance in particular deal with more history than just the US and the UK. I really want, I know there's somebody out there who's writing a Spanish set historical romance, not a fantasy, a historical romance with automata, like historically correct automata in, not like anatomically correct, historically correct automata in like medieval Spain.
Wow.
I would give a tooth for that. I would absolutely love to read that right now. And so people are writing them, and I just want so many more of them than I'm seeing. I want the full global spectrum.
I would love more personal stakes paranormal. I would love to see paranormal embrace some of the comedy and the the foibles of modern life. I feel like sometimes paranormal gets stuck in a very grand and dated sense of yes, everything's very big and ancient, and I would love to see some of just smaller stakes, personal stakes, emotional stake paranormal. And I think there's a group that's writing some that's called paranormal women's fiction, specifically also heroines or protagonists, particularly female protagonists that are in their 30s and 40s. We need more of us ladies that are reaching that magical point in our life to be involved in the magic. And, you know, like all of these immortal men who've been around for hundreds and thousands of years, what they really need is a good 40-year-old woman. Let me tell you what, that is the kicker. So yeah, I'd love to see more age diversity in paranormal. I'd love to see some quieter stakes. I'd love to see even more effortless inclusivity of people and in terms of their races and ethnic backgrounds. And I would love to see more queer paranormal stories, because I don't know that I see a ton right now. And I feel like, bring them over. Olivia, bring over the historicals. Bring them over. Open the gate. Send them down.
I'm doing my best, man.
Okay.
Have any of your books been put into audio form?
Yes, actually, the first 2 books in the Feminine Pursuit series are out in audio right now. They're read by Morag Sims, and she's divine. She just, the instant I heard her voice, I was absolutely smitten. She always sounds warm and witty, like she's on the verge of telling you a joke you're going to remember for the rest of your life. And it's just, it's hypnotizing. I'm not much of an audiobook person because my mind tends to wander, although I haven't tried the trick of like turning up the speed. And I think for me, I either need the text or I need a human face to connect with if I'm just listening to something. As soon as they give me an interesting image or idea, my brain goes, wow, grabs it, looks at it, turns it over, wanders over here with it, sees if I can crack it open. And then I kind of come back and we're like 5 minutes down the road and I have no idea what they're talking about. So it's a little bit hard for me to process. But yeah, but so, luckily, yeah. Luckily, Avon does not limit themselves to my particular like media format. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this year was a big lesson for me in the value of audiobooks. And so I hereby apologize to everyone who has ever heard me say, audiobooks. Because yeah, so that's the plan. That is the next link. The next effort is to get the books into audio. I have a new appreciation for it. I feel shabby for having not prioritized it in the past, and I would like to rectify that as soon as possible.
I think a lot of people don't get audiobooks until they get it. And then, so yeah, don't apologize. We understand. Probably the last question, as we're right at 8 o'clock. What is the book you wish you had written?
Oh, so many.
Just one?
So many.
As many as we can fit in till they kick us out.
Oh, right now? It's not out yet, but it's coming out, I think, in October. And it's Olivia Dade's Spoiler Alert. And it is so fun. It is a complete love letter to fan culture and like cosplay, and it's an apology to all the Game of Thrones fans out there in the world, and it's a staggeringly good romance. It's a couple of fanfic writers, and they're best friends on a fanfic server for a prestige TV show based on the Aeneid, which, oh my God. Like, and they're best friends on this fanfic server shipping Aeneas and Lavinia, but they don't know that in real life, she's a very savvy geologist who cosplays Lavinia as a fat woman and does so brilliantly, but she's a little nervous to tell her work friends about it because she knows they're going to think it's weird. And he is the actor who plays Aeneas, and he will get fired if they find out he's writing fix-it fic for the show he's on, because he disagrees with how terribly the writers are treating this particular storyline. So there's a lot of like huge scale things that are happening and a lot of small scale, like he ends up asking her cosplay identity on a date for a publicity stunt, but they don't know they're secretly fandom best friends. And so it's this like wonderful tension. And he figures it out first, and is he gonna tell her? He has to tell her, right? But he can't, because he'll get fired from the best job he's ever had. And like, meanwhile, so Olivia Dade is handling all of this. She's giving you snippets of fan fiction. She's giving you snippets of show scripts. She's giving you snippets of the absolutely rock bottom terrible rom-com scripts he was in before this show. It's the most fun anybody has ever had in a romance novel. It's like when they go on their date, all the other fans get so excited and start writing fic about their date in the book about their dates. Like, it's the most playful, wonderful, heartbreaking, like beautiful book. And then the guy who plays Cupid gets really into the idea of pegging because he finds all the Cupid pegging fanfic, and he's going to be book 2. And we're very excited. That is the book I wish I had written. Honestly, I am so envious and so proud. And I want book 2 immediately.
It's very good. Book 1.
Very good. Book 1, yeah. Spoiler alert, Olivia Dade. Yeah, wish I'd written it.
Ooh, single book. I think I kind of wish I had some people's entire backlist. Like I kind of just wish I could have, I mean, anything Elizabeth Cole decides that she wants to take her name off of and hand to me, I would happily be like, yes, I wrote that and I'll tell you all about it. I think the most recent one that I read was probably Take a Hint, Chloe Brown, where I felt like it was so funny and so charming and also really meaningful and really just had a really big emotional impact on me at the end of the book that I thought, yes, I don't even write contemporary romance, but like I wish I had written this book. I think in the like fantasy realm, I think Library of the Unwritten is one of those ones that I just felt like, oh man, this is so stellar. It is all of my catnip. I mean, it like lampshades tropes, and it's like the meta of books and writing and writers in this really wonderful mythological setting of heaven and hell, and the library of unwritten novels, of where all the novels that authors never finish go to like spend an eternity, is both heartbreaking and like the best idea ever, because characters come to life from the books and they escape the library and chaos ensues, and then the devil's got a book, and if you get the devil's book and the writing of the devil's book anyway, it's like stuff, and then heaven gets involved in the Watchers, and at the center of it is a character, a heroine who I think some people would describe as unlikable. She's very prickly, she's very hard, she is not affectionate, she is not outwardly loving. She has a lot of her own baggage and hurt, and there's a reason she is the librarian in the unwritten library. But she's so compellingly written and wonderful, and you really see her heart in the writing is so well done that you just like, you love her, even though you know if you tried to hug her, she would punch you in the face, or hit you with a book or something. And it's just such a well done book. I have not shed a tear at the end of a book in a long time. And I definitely hit the end and I was like, oh, that's who he was the whole time. So that's definitely, I put my name on that one in a heartbeat too.
That's the best though. That is the absolute best. Let's see if we can sneak in one more question. Do you start with a character or with a story trope when beginning a new book?
Depends. I wish I could say it was one or the other, but it really, every book has come to me in an entirely different way. So, I mean, for this one, it was definitely the werewolf who doesn't want to be a werewolf. And so that, I don't know if that's quite a trope, but it was definitely a character.
It should be. It was good.
It's like
great. Like, I could write you an essay on that.
Like I listened to I went to a class once, and who was teaching it is going to escape me, but putting, taking the trope and turning the trope by doing the opposite of what you would associate with that trope, which is this, the werewolf especially, and like, how can you mash two? So I took this idea of the scholar and then the werewolf and like smushed them into a single person, and that became really just, that was the book, and then from there it was like, well, who would be his person? And Barbara was like, me, and I said, you're it, and that's off to the races. So, but every book's been different.
Mm-hmm. I tend to start with Feminine Pursuit series. I've started with the jobs first, actually, and then everything kind of flowed from there. Like, so I start researching one particular like industry or trade, or so it's beekeeping or astronomy or silk weaving, piano tuning, and things kind of just would build from there. I would find anecdotes, I would find historical stories of people who were doing this at the time. And it's been really fun. I do tend to think structurally. I like to know a little bit about the setting, but I'm looking for those little moments where it feels like some fact really kind of comes to life. Like reading about court cases. All of book 3, like the backstory to book 3, comes from this one court case in the Old Bailey where 2 women tried to shoplift bolts of silk from a draper. And one of them got punished and the other did not. And then everything kind of took off from there. And it's been really fun. For the next books I'm going to have to do, I'm branching out into new time periods, so it's going to be that's a couple years down the road, but yes, I get to research a lot of new things where I don't know the milieu as well. And so I'm starting a little more with the characters there because I want to know something about who these people are before I try to put them into a new place. And the characters I can build right now. The setting I might have to read like 8 more books about.
The librarian in me loves to hear it. And I think that's it. That's our time.
Thank you so much. And if we were all in the same room, you would hear us giving you all a big round of applause. But thank you so much to Olivia, to Jasmine, and to Robin for this wonderful conversation. For those of you who are interested in reading Binding Shadows or The Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows, why can I not say that? Waspish. It's such a good title.
It's difficult. It is.
Waspish Widows.
Yeah.
Or if you want to read any of Jasmine and Olivia's books, you can find them at spl.org, and we put a lot of the links down in the chat. You can also find copies from our partners at Third Place Books, who are open for limited browsing and curbside pickup. You can, of course, always order Jasmine and Olivia's books through Third Place Books website as well, and that's thirdplacebooks.com. I wanted to take a minute to thank you all. Thank you so much to all of you for being here tonight. And then thank you to our sponsors, the Seattle Public Library Foundation, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, Seattle City of Literature, and the Seattle Times. And of course, thanks to everybody who joined us tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Good night, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
It's fun hanging out.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.